Hi, I'm Alberto Muti.
Hi, I'm Austin Ramsey.
My name is Caroline.
Tobin.
Hi, I'm Charlie Etheridge Nunn.
Hi, I'm Chris McDowell.
Hello, my name is Eran Aviram.
Hello there, my name is Fiona.
Hey everyone, I'm Helen Gould.
Hi, I'm James Torrance.
Hello, I'm Josh Fox from Black Armada Games.
Hi folks, I'm Logan.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lovegrove.
And I'm Rob Lovegrove.
Hello, my name is Grant Howitt. I'm joined by Christopher Taylor.
My name is Ryan Howard. And
hi, I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Alberto Muti. I'm a gamer, sometimes a games designer, and I've been the coordinator for Italian and international game chef in the past. A game that really captured me in 2020 is The Bloody-Handed Name of Bronze by Joshua A.C. Newman. It's a Bronze Age sword and sorcery game inspired by Torah and the mythology of ancient Mesopotamia. And it's just full of this amazing mythic, vivid imagery and inspiration. At the same time, the game always comes back to the key question in every conflict, in every situation of what do you want and how far are you willing to go to get it. And that creates these big stories of passion and struggle. I also want to shout out another game quickly, which I helped playtest. It's called Crying Wolf by Michael Duxbury, and it takes the fable of Peter and the Wolf and turns it into a terrifying survival horror experience.
Hi, I'm Austin Ramsey. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the designer of Beam Saber, a mecha anime forged in the dark game, plus others, which can be found at austin-ramsey.itch.io. I want to talk about Spindle Wheel to everyone who's listening. It's an incredible tarot-based deck tool that can be used for a wide variety of games. It was on Kickstarter recently, and it's successfully funded, well above its goal. There are many games which can be used to play Spindle Wheel with, and covering a wide variety of topics. And you draw cards, and the cards are incredibly evocative. They have some simple imagery as well as a short description of words on opposite sides of the card. And those two collections of words provide alternative ways of interpreting the card. So it's a lot like how with a tarot card you often have an image, and that image is meant to convey a meaning. But unless you're already familiar with tarot, you probably can't pick up on what that's supposed to be. But with Spindle Wheel cards, there's a pairing of words that help clarify and provide inspiration.
My name is Caroline, and my partner Mark and I are game designers. We've worked on games together from One Missed Call to Downfall, No Boundaries, Eden, and our upcoming game Epitaph. A game that's caught my interest this year has been Kingdom, specifically Kingdom 2nd Edition. We've played a whopping 35 sessions in one single kingdom, jumping around using the legacy rules to explore different time periods within our kingdom. It's been really incredible to play a GM-less story game over a long period of time with some really wonderful people.
I'm Tobin, and I'm the co-owner and managing director of Pelgrane Press, a tabletop RPG company. An indie TTRPG that caught my interest this year was one that I was lucky enough to play at Revelation in Sheffield back in February before we knew it was going to be the end of the world. And that's Bite Marks by Becky Annison. So Bite Marks is a PBTA game for 3 to 5 players about life in a werewolf pack. Now, werewolves aren't really my thing. I'm much more of a kind of vampire person, but I was excited. I like Becky's design, and I was excited to play in it. And I gave it a go, and I was just totally blown away by the group dynamics within it. The way Becky's designed the 7 different character types really make them very well integrated with each other. They create a lot of drama and a lot of kind of relationship angst and emotional angst, and there are some really fantastic moves in it that really drive home the kind of the dynamics of being part of that pack, you know, the werewolf pack and the tribe, and the connection and the how fraught a situation that can be.
Hi, I'm Charlie Etheridge Nunn. I write for Mad Robot Comics and I review indie role-playing games for Who Dares Rolls. This year, a game that's really fascinated me is Trophy Gold. Now, Trophy Gold is a game by the Gauntlet Publishing, specifically by Jesse Ross, and it takes Trophy Dark's original idea of being a kind of dark descent of a bunch of doomed adventurers, and it melds it with the dungeon crawling adventuring style of kind of classic fantasy RPGs that a lot of people I know kind of cut their teeth on in role-playing games. And it created this really interesting hybrid of a really narrative role-playing game, but also a push your luck game. It's the kind of thing that actually had my players poking and prodding at the environment, prying things up, desperate for any value, any money, any clues as to how to advance. And even after one of them died in an incredibly grisly fashion at the end of one session, they still came back the next week, desperate for more gold, desperate to keep going. And seeing that compulsiveness starting to happen in a role-playing session was amazing. It was the kind of thing I normally only see in a board game, really. So that really stuck with me and left me feeling the rules of Trophy Gold. It's, you know, it's the good shit, rules-wise.
Hi, I'm Chris McDowell, and I'm the designer of Electric Bastionland, Into the Odd, and writer at bastionland.com. The indie RPG that captured my interest this year is Heart, the City Beneath by Grant Howitt and Chris Taylor. And I was already a fan of their previous game Spire, but in particular I've been enjoying how Heart handles its adversaries. So while the game is a big nod to traditional dungeon crawling structure, there's much more of a focus on exploration and horror rather than combat. And this is reflected in how its monster equivalents are handled. So the game presents you with the things that the players are going to actually remember about the encounter. Most important of these being the creature's motivation, which is always more interesting than just they want to kill you. And instead of having special attacks that lean into a tactical combat system, they have evocative and often devastating fallouts that they inflict onto characters, most of which are things that will linger with you as you delve deeper into the heart. So for anybody that wants to read an interesting take on horrific spelunking and escaping monsters, I can recommend Heart, the City Beneath.
Hello, my name is Eran Aviram. You might know me from Crystal Heart, which is a Savage World setting, and up24players.com, where we do webcomic about Savage Worlds and role-playing games, or from several other places as well, like On the Shadow of the Dwarves, which is a podcast about role-playing games. And I would like to talk about The Wretched. It is the indie TTRPG that caught my interest this year, and why. It's a single-player game. I've been researching some of these for a single-player game that I'm working on. I want to see how can one create an experience that is both rich enough and interesting enough, maybe even for replays. And The Wretched, there's really no point in playing it more than once, I think. There's a trick there that I don't want to talk about, but I really like that trick, and it's exactly the sort of thing that I think that shows that we still have much to learn about and much to develop about single-player role-playing game. And it is, I think, a role-playing game. I'm not sure I would call it a storytelling game. There are prompts, and you are encouraged to write a diary of things that happen to you. But it is so very much the things that happen to you. And your own role in it is so important. There was just a second printing on Kickstarter, but the PDF would work very well, I think, for everyone. The Wretched, look for it.
Hello there, my name is Fiona. I am the host and regular GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. I'm also the co-host for the DM's Book Club. I want to share with you some of the tabletop RPGs that have caught my eye this year. Thanks to the pandemic, obviously, a lot of us are discovering our love of solo RPGs, games that have been designed for the single player in mind. I've been a massive fan of these kinds of games for some time, and I'm sure many people are familiar with some of the titles that have come out over the last couple of years. Titles such as A 1,000-Year-Old Vampire by Tim Hutchings, The Wretched by Loot the Room, Artifact by Jack Harrison, and of course Quill by Trollish Delver Games. The one solo RPG that has caught my attention this year is actually Twain, a short game for one by Jay Lee of Vermilion Games. I'm going to read the blurb of it for you because I think it's absolutely fascinating and I don't want to give anything away from it. Long ago, you had a twin, and you used to do magic together. You stopped because life got in the way. Your twin did not. The two of you lost touch. Now you've chosen to follow a dream about your youth, coming to a meeting place to find them. Your twin is not here. I played this game just before the UK's first full lockdown, and I have to say it had a really profound effect on me. It was a really different way of playing, so I can highly recommend checking it out and getting your own copy if you can.
Hey everyone, I'm Helen Gould, an editor and sensitivity reader for TTRPGs, and a performer on Rusty Quill Gaming, which is an actual play Pathfinder podcast. The indie TTRPG that has most captured my interest this year is Spaceships and Star Worms, that's worms with a Y instead of an O, by Audrey Stolzer. It's a sci-fi game written to be compatible with 5e. It's got some really interesting world building in it, including massive insectoid people who just want to be everyone's friend, a pirate collective who rule themselves out on the edges of space, and a nascent new species of people who have been born with nanomachines in their blood. I genuinely recommend taking a look at it if you're interested in space adventures.
Hi, I'm James Torrance, and I live in solitary confinement in a bunker in Cambridge where I do nothing but cook for myself and wash up all day long. And while I'm doing that, I listen on my Bluetooth earpiece to a load of historical murder mystery audiobooks. So I thought I'd pull out the classic Monster of the Week, the Powered by the Apocalypse monster hunting game, and use that to run a short sort of Cadfile style medieval murder mystery with occult monstery elements campaign. And that's worked pretty well for me. The playbooks in that are sufficiently flexible to work quite well in a historical setting.
Hello, I'm Josh Fox from Black Armada Games, author of Lovecraft-esque, Flotsam, Adrift Amongst the Stars, and Last Fleet. I would like to talk to you about Microscope Union. I'm a big fan of Microscope, which, if you don't know it, is a game where you collaboratively build an epic history, a timeline, sort of things like the rise and fall of the Empire of the Stars, that kind of thing, and you create these kind of big events and watch their effects ripple around the timeline. Zooming back and forth along the timeline and zooming in and out in terms of the level of detail you go into. But one of the problems that I've always had with Microscope is that it doesn't quite scratch the role-playing itch. It includes scenes, but the scenes feel a little bit tacked on. You don't really get into portraying a character in any great detail. It feels a little bit skin deep. And so the Microscope Explorer, which has actually been out for quite a few years, I think, I finally picked it up and played a few games with it, includes the Microscope Union game, which is a variant of Microscope in which you build a family tree instead of just an epic timeline. You choose one character and you are building up the generations that led to that character. Much the same sort of experience in terms of a feel of epic world building, which I love, but because all the characters are interconnected by blood, because there's quite a small number of characters involved, and you're coming back to the same people over and over again, they're closely interconnected. It means that you are building up scenes where you really get to know the characters, and start to develop something that feels a bit more than skin deep. So you get to scratch the world building itch. You also get to scratch the role playing itch. So it's really hitting my sweet spot. I'm excited to do more of it.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lovegrove.
And I'm Rob Lovegrove.
And I'm the writer of Rise and Fall from the Pelgrane anthology of Seven Wonders games, and also the layout artist for a number of Black Armada games.
And I'm the distinctly non-award-winning host of the Fictoplasm podcast.
I didn't say award-winning. I should have said award-winning.
You should have said award-winning.
I didn't. I'm award-winning. I'm going to start by talking about a really retro indie tabletop RPG that's caught my attention this year, which is Witch, The Road to Lindisfarne, which I've wanted to play for years and years and years. Has it been out for years and years? I wanted to play it since I first heard of it, and finally got to play it this year, and it's really cool. We've only played one session so far. We have another to go, but it's been great. It's been everything I hoped for, but it's also really sharpened up a lot of thoughts I have about using questions to generate interpersonal character drama stuff, in that I don't think it does them very well, and I've now got ideas for ways I want to do them better. So that's mine. What's caught your eye this year?
Mine is Apocalypse World Burned Over, which, and of course it's Apocalypse World, still an oldie but a goodie. But Burned Over is a sort of remixing, and I'm using it for my Damnation game, which is based on Roger Zelazny's Damnation Alley. But Apocalypse World Burned Over, it's kind of got more of a YA feel to it, which is why I particularly like it. It still could be a bit violent, but it's kind of less about the sex and more about the violence. Is that
fair enough? Yeah, that's more YA.
And a bit of rock and roll.
Hello, my name is Grant Howitt. I'm joined by Christopher Taylor of Rowan, Rook and Decard. And we wanted to celebrate, we wanted to mention Pocket-Sized Perils.
Yes, the little A6 adventure booklets by Brendan Barnett. They're 5th edition adventures.
Mm-hmm.
And they're cute as all hell. Little maps, little stats, little comics going on.
They're very dense. Each one tells a story. They're very small. They're one of the smallest forms of RPG you can get, and we just think they're the bee's knees. Now,
they're absolute bee knees.
There's one problem. They're not currently available to buy.
So you've got to hassle Brendan Barnett to make more.
Find Brendan Barnett and take them from him, or give him money for them. But he's planning to publish a full. So far, he's put out, how many has he put out? Like four or five?
4 or 5, yeah.
He's planning to do 26 in total, and they're absolutely cracking. So if you can pick them up or give them a follow on Twitter or what have you, do so, because they're really very good. It's Pocket-Sized Perils, and this is an unpaid endorsement from your friends at Rowan, Rook and Decard.
My name is Ryan Howard, and I am the host of Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, a twice-weekly RPG interview show which you can find on Twitch and YouTube. As someone who gets to interview RPG creators and people who love this game, I encounter so many different and unique RPG systems that may have fallen under your radar, and so it's my pleasure to talk about a couple of these games that I have discovered this year. And the first one that comes to mind that I honestly have to tell you all about is Slayers by Spencer Campbell. For anyone who missed out, this game was kickstarted this year, and one thing that it does better than any other game that I've encountered is true asymmetrical combat that's not overly complicated. All of the mechanics of this game tie back to a D6 pool that each player has. However, what that pool looks like and how it can be used is different from player to player. The fighter will use it one way, the gunslinger will use it another way, the magic class will use it in a completely different way, and there's a strategist class that controls everything. But each of them feels unique in their own way, but also the rules are very simple to explain to someone who maybe is new to RPGs or is so stuck in a specific system that, new rule sets just don't come naturally to them. So that's something that I definitely have to applaud Spencer for here with Slayers. So anyone who missed out on this Kickstarter, it is live on itch. Definitely go check out Slayers.
Hi, I'm Tom. You might know me from such podcasts as Fear of a Black Dragon, or less likely, the one that I co-host about the movie Mean Girls from 2004. I also create and translate role-playing games that I publish via the imprint Porcupine Publishing. The game that's really caught my attention in the last year as something that really was different from everything else that we played in our ongoing one-shot Saturday meetup that we have every week here in Hong Kong is Pariah by Sofinu, which is, it takes an old school framework. I mean, it's got old school in its description. I think the exact one is a Neolithic animist psychedelic old school role-playing game, and it has a lot of very bold design decisions in it and a lot of interesting emergent storytelling and world building. You know, there's all sorts of things going on, like troop play, where you're effectively the ancestor spirits of this band of Stone Age outcasts that are traversing the wilderness. Unusual rule switches when you go to the spiritual realms, like literally changing the game you're playing. A lot of very interesting ideas, and the kind of open design process that's still ongoing on Sofinu's web presence. You know, you can basically watch them designing the game and creating more things for it all the time. That's been really interesting, and I look forward to playing more of it.
Thinking a bit more broadly, a big trend I've seen in 2020 is, of course, online play, and all of us moving to play online because of the pandemic. Like many noted, it's not quite the same as playing face-to-face around a table, but I've loved how some creators engaged very imaginatively with the constraints and the opportunities of online play and created unique games that could only really exist in this medium. A game that made me think this is For Lovers by Jason Morningstar and Lizzie Stark, but also I've seen tons of really imaginative, creative, innovative games in the submission to the 2020 Golden Cobras, and I think you should check those out.
A trend I'd like to talk about is related to Spindle Wheel, which is games that put more narrative control in the hands of players, but keep momentum by providing prompts. Some games that are GM-less or GM-full, as their designers prefer, do this by providing cards which have questions on them or actions that must be taken. These are games like For the Queen and If Not Us, Then Who, for card examples. Or for other sorts of examples, there's games like Venture and other No Dice, No Masters / Belonging Outside Belonging games, where they're just prompts for the players to interact with and bounce off of. Other games that are more traditional in structure, such as Forged in the Dark games, have been giving player characters abilities that just let them make narrative declarations, such as saying that, oh, this character is important because they're my rival, or this one's important because they're my ally.
A trend this year, I think we've all experienced learning how to play online. Before this year, I'd done a little bit of online play, but now being at home and playing remotely, I've learned a lot of new skills about how I play well online, how I can facilitate well online, and how I can design games to be played online more easily. This year has been challenging in many different ways, and it's been a real balm and joy to be able to play story games online with people that I care about. It's been exciting and wonderful to have conversations with people I don't know about gaming, and I'm really looking forward to those connections and conversations continuing to grow.
Particularly since we went into lockdown, I've noticed just an explosion of more solo RPGs and kind of two-player RPGs, so RPGs that are designed outside of the traditional party size. So, like examples, at the end of last year, I backed The Wishing Sigil on Kickstarter, and that's by Banana Chan and Doug Lewandowski. And you draw sigils and write daily journals, which kind of chronicle your time in a Victorian workhouse. Another one that I backed here that I really liked was Wait For Me, which was Gian Shim and Kevin Culp's time traveling journaling game. And obviously enough, Tim Hutchings' 1,000-Year-Old Vampire has basically swept the board at this year's NE Awards and has been, it's been really changing people's perspective on what a solo game can be, I think. And Sean Tompkins' Ironsworn as well has a solo adaptation that seems to be doing really well in the kind of more trad kind of fantasy OSR kind of area of things.
With 2020 being such an isolated year for so many of us, I'm pleased to see a growing trend in solo and collaborative games that don't rely on having a table full of players with one GM sat separately. It might not be a new idea, but this year I've really enjoyed seeing people playing their own campaigns of Ironsworn and reading along with the stories that have come out of people's games using 1,000-year-old vampire.
I've also been invited to talk about a trend that I've noticed this year, and I've noticed several, probably most of them are not from this year, but I think something that is quite recent is the structured form. It's how games are now becoming more and more about several stages repeating. You can see it very obviously in Blades in the Dark, where they have downtime and the score and some nebulous free play around it, but downtime always leads to score, which leads to downtime, etc. You can also see it lately in Flying Circus, and of course previously in Night Witches. Both of them are about doing a mission in planes in the sky and then returning home and doing stuff at home and then again to the mission, and it's always this over circling all over the place, all over again, a sort of loop of structured form, and there are different rules for each of the stages, and that's very important, and it's really good. It creates a narrative form. It builds well with our narrative expectations as players in ways that D&D and Pathfinder are realizing as well, with downtime, which is more and more an activity. Now that Pathfinder 2 has activities, which is in the middle between downtime and combat encounters, and the more this develops, I think, the better it is for the entire hobby to not think about role-playing games as let's just start to do whatever it is we do, but in which stage of the role-playing game are we currently? And what expectations do we have from this stage specifically?
One aspect I've noticed happening more and more in our hobby is actually having more and more professionally created and produced streams of solo RPGs, having live actual plays showcasing these games which only have one player. I actually want to give a massive shout out here to someone who I think is doing great things in this field, Chloe of Roll Flip Draw. She has a solo RPG stream called Player One Ready. It's really nice to see someone playing through these games and sharing their unique experience for all the world to see. And Chloe does it in such a professional and creative way that it's really, really inspiring. I'm really excited to see what Chloe comes up with in the future for that stream. She also designs her own solo RPGs. She recently released an anthology called Otherworld, which has 6 solo RPGs, and that's available on her Ichigo, so please go check that out as well.
The best thing I noticed about the scene in general this year was the Itch.io bundle for racial justice and equality, which raised over $8 million in June. In an exceptionally tough year for people of colour and black people in particular, it soothed my heart a little to see the number of games that creators donated, totalling 1,741, if you were wondering. That was a nice spot of hope.
In terms of current trends in story games, there's been a flurry of variants on Alex Roberts' For the Queen, which is a sort of card-based prompt answering game. And the original, whilst beautifully produced, I found doesn't always do a great job of helping players build on one another's contributions to the story to weave a coherent world together as they answer the questions in the deck. And I found that some of the variants, which can be found on forthedrama.com, whilst sometimes a little unpolished, often do a better job of bringing those contributions together. I like this kind of casual storytelling game, although I'm still not quite sure if there's a real social niche for it. They're sort of too involved to bring to a board games night, but too slight to build an evening around. We shall see how the genre develops.
The trend that I have noticed this year is solo journaling games. This may have been going on for a while, I don't know. I can be quite slow to catch on to things, but quite a lot of solo journaling games going on, it seems to me. There's a couple that I've noticed, one being created by a designer who lives in my house, Wreck This Deck, but also The Wretched by Chris Bissett. I have recently had the pleasure of playing. I must admit, it's a bit of a strange experience for me. I am used to role-playing with other people, using their ideas, and sometimes kind of if my creative energy seems to fall off a little bit, letting other people pick up the slack. And it's a little bit odd to be reading, effectively the designer is the other player that you're playing with. They have provided you with the ideas and questions that you're going to springboard off. But your own creativity has to be there. You have to be in the mood to fuel the creative process. And also, this is strange for me personally, you're sat in a room on your own role-playing. It's a bit like picking up a choose your own adventure book. In a way, I suppose that's the closest experience I've had with it. But anyway, it's an interesting thing. A lot of people seem to be doing it. It's taking some of those ideas around random tables that you get from the OSR and turning it into a unique, personal, creative experience. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in that space.
Hi folks, I'm Logan. I use he, him pronouns. I am a queer, trans, forest-loving, tattoo-having indie tabletop game designer. You can find me yelling about all of these things on Twitter at ink_and_stories. And today, I want to talk about something super awesome I've seen in the indie tabletop sphere this year. This year has seen a wonderful collection of wildly successful indie tabletop game Kickstarters. The first I noticed was with Monster Care Squad by Sandy Pug Games, then again with Wander Home by Jay Dragon, and most recently with Thirsty Sword Lesbians by April with Evil Hat Productions. Side note, all the lead designers on these games are queer, so hell yeah. But what I really want to zoom in on is a wonderful feature of both the Monster Care Squad and Wander Home Kickstarters that I saw. Both of these projects, by the time they'd finished, included funds to give back and grow the indie tabletop community. Liam at Sandy Pug called it the Olamura Historical Grant Fund, named after the setting for Monster Care Squad, and Jay called it the Wander Home Community Fund for Wander Home. What both of these initiatives do is bankroll and support creatives who want to create content for the Kickstarter game, in this case, Wander Home and Monster Care Squad. This means designers can commission artists for art to support their piece, they can hire editors and consultants, artists can purchase materials and supplies, and everyone has their time and effort respected and valued. I should note too that the folks behind Monster Care Squad and Wander Home don't get any of that money. It goes directly to the creators. What they do get to see though is a flourishing of their game, expanded content, and the joy of creating in community. And this is incredible for the indie tabletop scene. It encourages creativity by providing inspiration, creates groups around these games that can work and chat together, and provides real support for those who are contributing. It's a prime example of climbing to great heights and then reaching back down to help another person up rather than kicking them down and taking the top spot. And that is what is so exciting about the indie tabletop scene. There are these instances of people creating beautiful things, celebrating it, being celebrated for it, and then pumping that energy right back into the scene. It's so great to see this show of mutual support, and I hope we can continue to see more of it.
And for obvious reasons. Online gaming, though, I think there's one really, really important point in that some indie games work extremely well for online gaming because they present all the stuff that you need on the table for the player. So Apocalypse World's playbooks are a prime example of that, and I can see going forward that more and more games will be designed with that in mind. At the moment, I think some of them just work much more effectively like that. I guess there's also going to be a trend that there'll be more resources like Warhorn that allow more trad games to be also played online effectively. But whilst we're unable to actually get around a physical table and have artifacts on the table, there's some really great indie games that work. There's some really great indie games that work in that space, I think. So.
The theme, or trend rather, that I would say has been influential, it's got to be the emergence of itch.io as a platform for analog games. I mean, I think a lot of people will say this. You know, it's something that is, I mean, a lot of people might have assumed that Drive-Thru RPG took away all the barriers to publishing and creation, and although it's done a lot, there was still a lot in the way for people in certain geographies or in certain circumstances that they couldn't. It was still tough to design and publish a game in some ways, and itch removes so many of those barriers. It's really been invigorating for the RPG scene. Although, obviously the criticism then is that maybe it's removed so many barriers that there's not enough of a filter. But I think the lack of that filter, the fact that you can go so quickly from having an idea to getting it out into the world for people to, try and enjoy. I mean, I think we're all just going to benefit from the access to everybody's ideas that brings. And in fact, I think the trend that we might see, I don't have a game particularly to predict, but I hope that the community aspect of itch.io, and I think you see that a little bit on Twitter already with RPG LATAM and RPG Southeast Asia, we'll get more networking and get better at finding what we're looking for on itch games, and more of a review and commentary culture rather than just sort of the random access that it suffers from a little bit at the moment.
Looking at the future and looking at things where I'm excited about for 2021, beyond hopefully going back to be able to meet my friends in person and play with them, is a game called Wonder Home by J-Dragon. You've probably heard about it because of its Kickstarter. And I tried it this summer and it completely blew me away by the way the game creates a sense of mood, a sense of wonder, and a sense of space, of place, and truly gets the player to engage in it and join and live in that space for a while. And it was quite magical, and I can't wait to go back there.
An upcoming game that I'm really excited about are the Little Box games from Story Brewers. I'm really excited to play those. It's 2 small games that are GM-less. They look beautiful, and I'm excited to have something small, short, and self-contained to be able to just take out and play with friends.
The one that I'm the most looking forward to, I think, is Jiangxi, which is Blood in the Banquet Hall. Again, that's by Banana Chan and Sen Foon Lim. And it's an RPG of Chinese immigrants who are basically running their family restaurant during the day, but then at night they have to deal with the hauntings of the Jiangxi, the hopping vampires. So it's a collaborative storytelling RPG about a Chinese family. So again, it brings in all of that wonderful familial drama and conflict that you can imagine. But because it's set in one of America's Chinatowns in 1920, it also tackles the kind of societal backlash and anti-Chinese laws of that period.
As far as role-playing games that I'm looking forward to next year, I admit I like any kind of game that can veer away from standard sort of high fantasy or science fiction or horror kind of tropes and try something else, try something a little different. And that's where Pasión de las Pasiones is fascinating to me. I love the way that it takes the Powered by the Apocalypse framework and adds more to it by taking away any stats. Instead, you are asked questions about the moment, like, in this moment, do they believe that you're single? Those kind of things. And each of those questions that you answer yes to is a +1 to your dice roll. It creates a really fascinating storyline that you can play around with, and I've only had a go of the demo so far, but I can't wait to see the finished product, as Brandon Leon Gambett has really brilliantly expressed what telenovela means, especially to someone like a southern white English guy that's never seen one in their life, and made them go, yes, this is the role-playing game that I want to try out. I want this in my life.
Looking forward, like so many others, I'm hopefully anticipating the release of the Break RPG by Ronaldo Madrunian and Grey Wizard. It's an adventure game inspired by Studio Ghibli and old NES era video games. And in an RPG landscape where graphic design is becoming used more and more to portray the feel of the game, as well as communicating information, Break is looking like a future landmark for RPG book design, as well as presenting a world that just looks like it will be a joy to explore both on the page and at the table.
Finally, and TTRPG I'm looking forward to, specifically in indie world, is Voidheart Symphony from UFO Press, from Minerva McGenda. I am a sucker for tabletop experiences based on video game experiences, and this one is vaguely based on Persona, as far as I understand. I hope I'm not confusing it with something else. There are several such games currently in development or going out. I think this is a very welcome thing. I think that indie games from, well, Persona is not an indie game, but generally speaking, indie experiences, unusual experiences in video games have much to do just in the TTRPG world, and we can probably turn a lot of them into TTRPG experiences and experience them in a slightly different way, but still with the core set of principles. That's very interesting, and that's a lot of fun.
Finally, an upcoming RPG that I'm really looking forward to is Questlings, an RPG based on a new series of books about children discovering their role-playing personas. I will say I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this game because I do know some of the people who are involved and I'm big fans of their work. We have Banana-chan, who some people may recognise from games such as The Wishing Sigil, a great solo RPG game if you're interested, but I think most recently people will know them for Jianshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall. We also have Tim Devine, who's worked on Kids on Bikes and North Sea Epilogues. I genuinely think this will be a great game for everyone and anyone who's interested in RPGs, but particularly families with maybe younger children who are interested in trying an RPG or even running one. The artwork is great, the concept behind the stories and the game itself is just really, really simple. Questlings just ticks all the boxes for me.
Lastly, the upcoming TTRPG that I'm most excited about is Jiangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall, by Game Under Curry Games and Wet Ink Games. It's about exploring the immigrant experience through the lens of running a restaurant which is being attacked by supernatural forces. They've got loads of collaborators from many different cultures, and each scenario in the book has something unique to offer. It's definitely one to keep an eye out for.
So, in terms of the future, I'm excited about Paul Baldowski's The D-Sanction, recently kickstarted, which should allow for even more historical murder mystery games, this time dabbling with Renaissance Hermeticism in Tudor times.
Finally, the game that I'm looking forward to is Sig City of Blades by Jason Pitzer, and that is it's a Forged in the Dark game, so based off Blades in the Dark, but recreating a feel. So the city is Sig. It's a multi-dimensional, multi-planar city, and if that sounds a bit familiar, I think it is essentially Planescape with the serial numbers filed off. Don't sue Jason. But I think it might be. So at any rate, the idea of a multiplanar city with factions competing for dominance and using the kind of Blades in the Dark system that puts your characters right in the middle of those faction politics and gives them individual missions to do that intersect with all of those politics. It seems like a really cool implementation of that idea. I darkly suspect it will be significantly better gameplay-wise than the original Planescape was. And of course, I have real nostalgia spectacles, like many people, for Planescape. So I'm hoping it's going to be a real great experience sometime next year.
Upcoming tabletop RPGs that we're looking forward to. Well, I've got two, so shall I do one and then you do another?
Why not?
Okay. Firstly, selfishly, I'm really looking forward to Josh Fox's Last Fleet game, published by Black Armada, because I did the design for it, and I'm really looking forward to holding the physical object in my hand. It's some beautiful, beautiful art, which I can say because I didn't do the art. And it's a really great game, and it hooks into the kinds of stories you can tell in the Battlestar Galactica kind of vein, which is one of my favourite TV shows. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to kind of playing the final version of that, because I played it a bit in playtest and obviously I've read all of the rules. But so that's my first one.
Oh, mine is Everway, the Silver Anniversary Edition, which it was 1996 it was published, and so 2021 will be the 25th anniversary. And I'm just really excited because it's supposed to... I'm just really excited because it's great that it's going to be available in the market again, because it's been unavailable for so long. The title changed hands so many times, and which is a story in itself for another time. But I've always liked Everway in terms of the tactility of it, the focus on artwork, the simple characters that are painted with very broad strokes, and how you can actually get into sort of the feel of your character. Everything is there on the character sheet. You don't actually have to know much more.
That's pretty cool. And the art is gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Apparently I'm a sucker for the art. The other one I'm really looking forward to is a Kickstarter that's just funded last week or the week before, which is The Map Is Not the Territory, which is a bunch of kind of mini games and essays and supplements and bolt-ons and stuff. But the cool thing is that they chose, I can't remember the guy's name, it's Chris something. Sorry, Chris something, I'll look up what your name is. I did and then I forgot it again. But he chose a particular map from a public domain repository of maps that are available for people to reuse. Right? Yes. And invited submissions for people to produce RPG content relating to this map. So it's I think it's about 24 different things, all riffing off the same map in different ways. And I just think maps are really, really cool. And so many of us have kind of that dungeon map from D&D kind of back in the beginnings of our role-playing experience, our role-playing lives, that to do new and exciting things with that, I'm really excited about it.
Now, in addition to new RPGs, I've also had the privilege of talking to people about some older RPGs as well, and discovering some of the, big, venerable players in independent RPGs. And of course, foremost among those, a company that's been doing this as long as this hobby's been around is, of course, the Chaosium. And so, my most anticipated game of 2021 is the 6th edition of Pendragon. This is not a game that I've played. I have never been able to play Pendragon. I've never read the rulebook. But seeing its impact on different people who I've had on my show, namely Stu Horvath of the Vintage RPG podcast, seeing how it influences other RPGs that have come out and continue to come out, makes me really want to see what the deal is with this game, Pendragon. And with the 6th edition coming out, some of Greg Stafford's last work in his illustrious career, what he called the ultimate edition of Pendragon in 6th edition, I am beyond excited to see what Chaosium has in store for us with this particular edition. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this discussion. I hope I've turned you on to some new games and renewed your excitement for a game that so many people are excited to see finally come to fruition. Thank you so much, and whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you around.